What if I told you there's a piece of metal no bigger than your thumb that's currently sitting in a legal gray zone, making lawmakers lose sleep, gun control advocates furious, and Second Amendment defenders ready for battle? A device so controversial that it's been called everything from a life-saving innovation to a mass shooter's best friend. And here's the kicker, it's completely legal in most states right now, as we speak. I'm talking about forced reset triggers, or FRTs. And if you haven't heard of them yet, buckle up because this story is about to get wild. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we break down the biggest legal controversies, court battles, and political firestorms in a way that actually makes sense. No jargon, no boring lectures, just the facts, the drama, and the questions nobody else is asking. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most explosive debates in American gun politics right now, a debate that involves the ATF, millions of gun owners, federal raids, courtrooms packed with angry citizens, and a tiny piece of hardware that might just redefine what it means to own a semi-automatic weapon in America. So if you care about your rights, if you're curious about how laws actually work, or if you just want to understand why this tiny trigger is making people absolutely furious on both sides of the political spectrum, you need to stay with me until the end. Trust me, this gets crazier than you think. Let's go. All right, first things first. What the heck is a forced reset trigger? Let me break this down in the simplest way possible, because understanding this device is key to understanding why everyone's so worked up about it. Normally, when you fire a semi-automatic gun, let's say an AR-15, one of the most popular rifles in America, here's what happens. You pull the trigger, the gun fires one bullet. The trigger moves backward. Then you have to manually release the trigger, let it reset forward, and pull it again to fire another round. One trigger pull equals one bullet. That's the definition of semi-automatic. It's been the standard for over a century. Now enter the forced reset trigger, or FRT. This thing changes the game entirely. With an FRT installed, the trigger still fires one bullet per pull. Technically, but here's the twist. The mechanism inside the gun automatically pushes the trigger back to its forward position after every shot. It literally forces the trigger to reset. So instead of you having to release the trigger yourself, the gun does it for you. All you have to do is keep your finger in place and maintain pressure. The trigger bounces back, you pull again, it fires, it resets, you pull, it fires, it resets, and this happens insanely fast. How fast are we talking? Try this. A skilled shooter with a standard semi-automatic AR-15 might be able to fire around 45 to 60 rounds per minute if they're really good. With an FRT, we're talking upwards of 600 to 800 rounds per minute. That's the same rate of fire as many fully automatic machine guns. Let me say that again. With this tiny modification, a legal semi-automatic rifle can shoot at nearly the same speed as a military machine gun. And that's where the fury begins. Now you're probably thinking, wait, aren't machine guns illegal? Great question. Let me explain. In the United States, fully automatic weapons, machine guns, have been heavily regulated since 1934 under the National Firearms Act. Then, in 1986, the Firearm Owners Protection Act made it illegal for civilians to own any machine gun manufactured after May 19, 1986. So if you want to own a legal machine gun today, it has to be one that was registered before that date, and it'll cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 or more because they're so rare. But here's the thing. The law defines a machine gun very specifically. According to federal law, a machine gun is a weapon that fires more than one shot by a single function of the trigger. And this is where forced reset triggers live, in that sneaky legal gray zone. Technically, an FRT still only fires one bullet per trigger pull. You're still pulling the trigger multiple times. The trigger is just resetting automatically because of the mechanical design. So manufacturers and gun rights advocates argue that FRTs are not machine guns under the legal definition. They're just a really, really efficient semi-automatic trigger system. The ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, disagrees strongly. In 2022, the ATF issued a ruling that classified forced reset triggers as machine guns, making them illegal to own, sell, or manufacture. The ATF argued that because the shooter doesn't have to manually release the trigger, the device effectively allows the gun to fire continuously with a single sustained trigger pull, which meets the definition of a machine gun. But here's where it gets even messier. Not everyone agrees with the ATF's interpretation. Gun manufacturers, Second Amendment advocacy groups, and thousands of gun owners have pushed back hard, arguing that the ATF overstepped its authority, that the agency is trying to rewrite laws instead of just enforcing them, and that millions of law-abiding citizens are now being turned into felons overnight for owning a device that was completely legal when they bought it. Some of these cases are now in federal court, and the stakes absolutely massive. Let's talk about the companies at the center of this firestorm. The most famous forced reset trigger on the market is called the FRT-15, made by a company called Rare Breed Triggers. This device became hugely popular among gun enthusiasts, competitive shooters, and people who just thought it was cool to fire their AR-15 faster without breaking the law. Rare Breed marketed the FRT-15 aggressively, insisting it was 100% legal. They even included a letter in every box from their lawyer explaining why the device didn't meet the legal definition of a machine gun. They sold tens of thousands of these triggers, maybe more. Business was booming. Then in 2022, the ATF came knocking. Federal agents raided Rare Breed's facilities. The ATF sent cease and desist letters. They demanded that the company stop manufacturing and selling FRTs immediately. They also sent letters to thousands of people who had purchased the triggers, basically saying, hey, that thing you bought, it's illegal now. Turn it in, destroy it, or face federal prosecution. Imagine waking up one day to a letter from the federal government telling you that the $400 piece of metal you legally bought last year is now classified as a machine gun, and you could go to prison for 10 years if you don't get rid of it. That's what happened to thousands of Americans. Rare Breed didn't back down. They sued the ATF, arguing that the agency doesn't have the authority to redefine what a machine gun is. That's Congress's job. The case is still ongoing, and it's being watched very closely by the entire firearms industry. Other companies like Big Daddy Unlimited and various smaller manufacturers have also gotten caught up in this legal mess. Some stopped selling FRTs immediately. Others are fighting in court. It's chaos. All right, now let's get into why this issue has people on both sides of the political spectrum absolutely furious. Side one, gun control advocates. On one side, you have gun control advocates, safety organizations, and many law enforcement officials who are horrified by forced reset triggers. Their argument is pretty straightforward. If it walks like a machine gun, talks like a machine gun, and fires like a machine gun, then it's a machine gun. They point to mass shootings, rising gun violence, and the sheer destructive potential of a weapon that can unleash hundreds of rounds per minute. They argue that FRTs are designed for one purpose: to circumvent federal law and turn semi-automatic rifles into weapons of war. They also point to real-world danger. In 2022, a man in North Carolina was arrested after allegedly using an FRT-equipped rifle to fire over 100 rounds during a domestic dispute. Thankfully, no one was killed, but the incident terrified the community and made national news. Stories like this fuel the argument that these devices have no place in civilian hands. Gun control groups like Everytown for Gun Safety and Giffords Law Center have called for an outright ban on FRTs, bump stocks, and any device that increases a gun's rate of fire. They argue that the ATF's 2022 ruling was necessary, overdue, and legally sound. Side two, gun rights advocates. On the other side, you have Second Amendment advocates, gun owners, libertarians, and people who deeply distrust government overreach. Their argument is equally passionate. The ATF doesn't get to make laws. Congress does. And according to the actual text of the law, forced reset triggers are not machine guns because they still require a separate trigger pull for each shot. They argue that the ATF is engaging in regulatory creep, slowly chipping away at gun rights by redefining terms, reclassifying devices, and turning law-abiding citizens into criminals without any input from elected representatives. They see this as a dangerous precedent. If the ATF can redefine machine gun to include FRTs today, What's next? Binary triggers, competition triggers, standard triggers that happen to be really smooth. Gun rights groups like the Firearms Policy Coalition and Gun Owners of America have rallied hard against the ATF's ruling. They've filed lawsuits, organized protests, and flooded social media with videos showing how FRTs work, arguing that education and transparency will prove their point. And here's something interesting. Some people on this side aren't even FRT owners. They just hate the idea of unelected bureaucrats wielding this much power. Let's get into some real-life examples because this isn't just theoretical. This is affecting real people right now. Case 1, the Florida gun owner. In Florida, a man named John, let's call him that for privacy, purchased an FRT-15 in early 2021. It was completely legal at the time. He's a competitive shooter, never been in trouble with the law, and he used the trigger for fun at the range. Then in 2022, he gets a letter from the ATF telling him he's now in possession of an illegal machine gun. John panicked. He didn't want to destroy a $400 device he legally bought, but he also didn't want to risk a felony charge. He eventually surrendered the trigger to local police, but he's now part of a class action lawsuit against the ATF, arguing that the agency violated his rights. Case 2, the Texas raid. In Texas, federal agents executed a search warrant at a gun store suspected of selling FRTs after the ATF ban. They seized inventory, computers, customer records, everything. The store owner claims he stopped selling FRTs as soon as the ruling came down, but the ATF didn't care. His business is now under federal investigation, and he's facing potential criminal charges. His lawyer argues this is government intimidation designed to scare other businesses into compliance. Case 3, the courtroom battles. Multiple federal cases are now working their way through the courts. In one case, a judge issued a temporary injunction blocking the ATF from enforcing the FRT ban, arguing that the agency likely overstepped its authority. In another case, a different judge sided with the ATF, saying the devices clearly function like machine guns and the ban is legal. This split in the courts means the issue will likely end up at the Supreme Court eventually, and that decision could have massive implications, not just for FRTs, but for how much power federal agencies have to regulate firearms without Congress. Here's the big question that nobody wants to answer, but everyone's thinking about: where do we draw the line? Technology is advancing fast. Engineers and gunsmiths are constantly designing new triggers, new mechanisms, new ways to make guns faster, smoother, more accurate. Some of these innovations are genuinely useful for competitive shooting, self-defense training, and lawful recreation. Others are clearly designed to skirt the edges of the law. Binary triggers, for example, fire one round when you pull the trigger and another when you release it. Technically, that's two separate trigger functions, so they're legal under current law, but they still double your rate of fire. Echo triggers, light triggers, competition triggers, there's a whole world of modifications out there. Should all of them be banned? Should none of them? Who decides? And here's the even bigger question. Should unelected bureaucrats at the ATF be the ones making these decisions, or should Congress step in and actually write clear, specific laws that define exactly what is and isn't legal? Because right now, we're in this weird gray zone where the rules keep changing, people don't know what's legal anymore, and both sides are furious. So what happens next? Honestly, nobody knows for sure. But here's what we're watching. 1, the courts. Multiple lawsuits are ongoing. If one of these cases reaches the Supreme Court, we could get a definitive ruling on whether the ATF has the authority to classify FRTs as machine guns. That decision would affect millions of gun owners and could reshape how firearms are regulated in America. 2, Congress. Some lawmakers are pushing for legislation that would explicitly ban forced reset triggers and similar devices. Others are pushing for laws that would limit the ATF's power to reclassify firearms and accessories without congressional approval. Right now, Congress is divided, so neither side has enough votes to pass anything, but that could change after the next election. 3, public opinion. Public opinion is all over the map. Polls show that most Americans support some form of gun control, but they also support Second Amendment rights. The devil is in the details. When you ask people specifically about forced reset triggers, the answers depend heavily on how the question is framed. It's a deeply polarizing issue. 4. Compliance and enforcement. Right now, the ATF is trying to enforce the ban, but it's unclear how many people are actually complying. Some gun owners have destroyed or surrendered their FRTs. Others have hidden them. Some are openly defying the ATF, daring the government to come after them. Enforcement is inconsistent, and that's creating even more confusion and anger. You might be thinking, I don't own a gun. Why should I care about this? Here's why. This issue is about way more than just guns. It's about how laws are made and enforced in America. It's about whether unelected agencies can redefine terms and create new crimes without Congress. It's about the balance between public safety and individual rights. It's about trust in government, the rule of law, and how we navigate complex issues in a country that's deeply divided. If you care about how power works in America, this story matters. If you care about civil liberties, this story matters. If you care about gun violence, this story matters. And if you care about making sure our laws are clear, fair, and democratically decided, this story really, really matters. All right, we've covered a ton today. Forced reset triggers, the ATF's controversial ban, the legal battles, the furious reactions from both sides, the real-life cases, the big questions about power, technology, and where we draw the line. This is one of those issues where there's no easy answer, and that's exactly why it's so important to talk about it. So here's what I want to know. What do you think? Should forced reset triggers be banned, or is the ATF overstepping? Do you think Congress needs to step in and write clearer laws? Are you worried about public safety, or are you more concerned about government overreach? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's have a real conversation. Be respectful, but don't hold back. I want to hear from all sides. And if you made it this far, thank you. Seriously, this was a long one, but this topic deserves the deep dive. If you found this valuable, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown. We've got more legal controversies, court battles, and political firestorms coming your way. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and never stop asking questions.